Welcome to the Procurement podcast, where we aim to excite and inspire you about how technology will shape our profession's future. I'm your host, James Meads, and I worked in corporate procurement for 16 years before starting my own business as a content creator and consultant in the procurement technology space. I'm deeply convinced that procurement must become less technocratic and embrace the entrepreneurial spirit and creativity if we're ever going to shake off our image of being a process-obsessed, box-ticking function. You definitely won't find vanilla content on here, and we're not afraid to tackle some controversial topics and tell it like it really is. So if that's your thing, now let's jump right into this week's episode. Yes, hello, and a very warm welcome to another episode of the Procurement podcast. Great to have you with us. And just before we dive into today's podcast, just want to give you a very quick update of what we've been doing over on the website at procurementsoftware.site, because we've just launched a brand new look and fresh feel to the website, which is really the culmination of pretty much the whole summer that we've been working on putting this together. What does it mean for you as the user? Well, a couple of things really. It means that the front end user interface is a lot more fresh and modern looking, which makes it much, much easier and more intuitive, hopefully, for you to use. Would love to get your feedback on that. We've added another 65 new solutions into the database. So we've now got over 400 solutions that are on there. And we've also launched 2 new digital products as part of our refresh. The first one that we've launched is a completely free of charge introductory 25-minute online course called Digital Procurement 101, where I really just give anyone that's curious to get to know more about the digital space a very quick and easily accessible product that they can watch. I think it's 8 videos in total that we've got on there that is only 25 minutes long in total, which means that you can watch that on your lunch break and get a good solid grounding of the digital procurement space. Really, what I want to do here is just to amplify the message of what digital procurement can do and the potential that it offers, which is why we're offering that course completely free, regardless of whether you're a practitioner, consultant, or solutions provider. Go in and download it. Just head to store.procurementsoftware.site and you can go in and access that course. The other product that we've launched is back-end access to our database that powers the front end of procurementsoftware.site. And we did this because while the front end does offer you a number of things that you can filter on and drill down on completely for free, I realized that there are more advanced users out there that may want to have a bit more of a malleable tool that they can filter, slice, dice, group data in whichever way they want to do that. So we've got 2 different tiers that we're going to offer for this product. The first one will get you a year's access to the database, where anytime that we update anything in there, you'll immediately be able to see it and you can filter, slice, dice the data in whichever way you want to, based on much more search criteria than you currently have on the front end of the website. Then the second tier, which is really aimed more at boutique consultancies and solutions providers, maybe that want to do competitive research or really get a deep knowledge of the market, that will then offer you push notifications each time we add or update a record or modify a record in the database. If you want to learn more and maybe want to hop on a quick 15-minute call with me to see a demo, then just reach out, james@procurementsoftware.site, and I would love to show you what we've done. I'm really, really proud of it, and I think that it offers really an affordable way to get to grips and completely understand the whole procurement tech ecosystem without having to take out a 5-figure subscription to one of the more expensive research houses out there. Anyway, that's enough from me talking about our digital products. Today's episode is a solo episode called The State of Procuretech. I don't normally do solo episodes for the very simple reason that the guests that I bring onto the show offer so much more knowledge than I could ever give you on my own in this space. And I, just for purely selfish reasons, just to love to soak up their knowledge as a bit of a sponge and understand everything that's driving the digital procurement ecosystem from their standpoint as well. But every now and again, I do like to do the odd one of these. And the last one that I did was back in May. So I thought it was time to do a little bit of time with just me and you as the listener to update you on a couple of things that I'm seeing out there from conferences that I've been to, conversations that I've been having. So I'm going to break this down into 2 sections. The first one is going to look at some of the fundamental issues, challenges, and opportunities that the procurement profession has in general. And then in the second section of this podcast, I'm going to go through some of the trends that I'm seeing in the procurement technology market based on some of the conversations that I've been having over the past few months. So let's dive straight in, first of all. And the first thing that I'm seeing as a challenge out there is change management. So a lot of the talks that I heard last week when I was at ProcureCon in Barcelona, and I suspect it will be the same at DPW, which I'm attending this week as this podcast is published, is all around change management and bringing people along with you on the journey. We're dreadful marketers, aren't we, in procurement? We're not very good at communicating why we're doing something and bringing our stakeholders along with the journey. So change management and marketing and communication, which I would sort of apply the same logic to, these are both areas where there's a lot of talk now that we just need to bring our stakeholders into the journey sooner and communicate with them better around what we're trying to do and really understand how technology or how procurement in general can help improve their day-to-day life within the company that we work for. Tied into that is the discussions, and there were a lot of these discussions at ProcureCon actually around talent, particularly around acquiring and then retaining good young professionals that want to come into the procurement profession. And it's been talked about a lot that there aren't really many degree programs, especially at undergraduate level, that focus primarily on procurement. There are a few more now coming into the master's space. And there was a great talk actually at ProcureCon by Paul Alexander, who's a former CPO who now is putting together an academic program for an MSc in procurement at the University of Portsmouth in the UK, talking a little bit about this, about how can we prep youngsters coming out of university, either as bachelor's or as master's graduates, that want to actually come into procurement as a profession and are already to some extent trained as to what to expect when they join the profession. A lot of us, me included, kind of sort of fell into procurement and didn't really go through college or university saying at the end of it, I want to go and work as a buyer. Nobody really did that, certainly 20 or so years ago when I entered the profession. So a lot of talk about talent and what we can do to retain them and attract them into procurement. Salaries is obviously going to be a big one, especially if you look at the cost of living crisis that we have across most of North America and Western Europe. But also making the profession attractive enough to want to retain younger millennials and Gen Z. And I talk a lot about that in terms of really just giving people the tools that they want to use to do their job. If you've got digital natives coming into your organization that have grown up using smartphones, if they've used Uber or Tinder or Airbnb or any of these really easy to use interactive B2C apps, and then they get into work and they have to use an ERP system that feels like it was designed in the 1990s, because it was, or some of this legacy clunky procurement technology. It's little wonder that folks are disillusioned with that type of approach. So I do think having a good modern tech stack is a piece. It's not the be all and end all, but it's certainly a piece of the puzzle of how can we attract and retain the best talent into procurement roles. The other one that I heard, and this both surprised me and made me despair a little bit at the same time, is that a lot of big corporates are really restricting travel budget at the moment, meaning that conferences often are struggling to get the number of attendees that they want to get, and people are really having to justify why they need to travel from a business case perspective, which I kind of understand. There's no infinite travel budget that anyone can go out and spend, but I do think it's a very commercially illiterate approach to be limiting what people can spend their money on when it's going to develop them as people through attending these conferences and getting inspiration and understanding what peers and competitors are doing in this space. And I just think it's a very short-termist view. Why not give, and maybe I'm just a little bit too much of an entrepreneur in the way that I think about these things, but why not just give every single person in your team a travel budget that they can manage, or a conference budget or a training budget that they can manage, and give them the autonomy to go out and spend it wisely themselves on what they think they need. And if they think that they can upskill themselves by watching YouTube videos and taking Udemy courses, then maybe they'll have a few $100s or euros left over to go and attend a conference, for example. It just seems to me a very logical and very modern way, progressive way of approaching this, by just saying, give your employees autonomy to spend a set budget as they see fit. And then it takes this whole debate out of the equation. Okay, so moving on, there is lots of talk about digitization out there in general, but something that I'm starting to question is there much action in terms of purchasing and implementing solutions beyond the big source-to-pay suites? And it's kind of a rhetorical question, because I am seeing, especially in the sustainability space and the ESG space, a lot of software solutions are really growing in that area. But I'm also seeing some solutions I think are struggling somewhat to really kick on from their initial customer acquisition journey. So be interested to hear anyone's thoughts on that, what they're seeing out in the marketplace, particularly maybe from some solutions providers. But there's a lot of talk about digitization. It's everywhere now. It dominated the agenda at ProcureCon, along with sustainability and ESG and talent. They were the three pillars, I would say, in terms of the major conversation and presentation topics. But what is actually happening on the ground? How many organizations are actually going ahead and implementing tech beyond the big Fortune 500 large enterprises? I'm not entirely sure there. And the other thought that popped into my mind when I was looking at how fast, especially some of these sustainability tools are growing, is can we as procurement professionals perhaps tap in to the opportunity that the drive for sustainability and supply chain transparency and emissions tracking is going to give us, to perhaps then open the door to get investment into other procurement technology as well? Because, sustainability, especially in Europe with some of the legislation that's coming in, companies are going to have to invest in some tech to be able to track all of the regulatory data that is going to have to be reported on at some point in the near future. So can we tap into that to get more investment into other areas of procurement tech that we also desperately need? So let's now move on to what I'm generally seeing as trends in the market from a procurement technology space. So number one, perhaps the elephant in the room, is generative AI. There is a heap of conversation going on about generative AI. Lots of theory. Is anyone actually doing that much though? There are a lot of tech platforms that are incorporating generative AI, particularly on the source to pay and procure to pay and intake side. A lot of tech companies are bringing that in as part of the experience, really to just enhance the first touch point, I guess, that the user has with the technology, because it's a lot easier to use generative AI to really extrapolate and understand what the user is asking for, and then helping to point them in the right direction towards who they need to speak to, or maybe what catalog they need to access, or what procurement tool they need to leverage to fulfill their need, particularly in the source to pay or the intake process. This also can be, on the subject of AI in general, can be a cheap way to unlock some extra resources within your procurement team through automating and simplifying what were previously quite time-consuming tasks. And by that, I'm thinking of using tools like ChatGPT and other similar tools that are out there to just do a lot of the heavy lifting for you that previously would have been impossible just even a year ago. So without necessarily needing a big budget to go out and buy some technology, with just, I think it's $20 a month that ChatGPT costs as a subscription, as a premium user, that gives you a lot of opportunity to be able to automate away or use AI kind of as a personal assistant to do a lot of your spade work for you that otherwise would have taken up a lot of time for the average procurement professional. So that's number two, sort of connected to the whole generative AI conversation. Number three is the opportunity that low-code and no-code tools offer as an alternative to some of perhaps the more simple procurement software applications. So whereas if you'd have asked me when I first started this podcast 3.5 years ago, back in March 2020, does it make sense to build your own procurement tech stack? I would have said, don't be silly. Why are you trying to communicate with all of these VC-backed entrepreneurs and software geniuses in Silicon Valley or elsewhere in the world that are building these great procurement tech applications? Why would you even try doing that with an in-house team? Now, I'm kind of seeing it from a different perspective because, and this, I'm talking here more on the sort of lower end of the market. You can use low-code and no-code platforms to build some pretty basic but very functional applications that can automate and that can store a lot of data and become a good sort of repository or internal tool for things like contract management, vendor master data or supplier relationship management, requisition to PO automation, and also just like project management or project collaboration type applications. So certainly at the lower end, instead of going out and buying a cheap SaaS application to do this, with no-code platforms like Airtable and SmartSuite and ClickUp, just to use some examples, you can build your own software that can do that. So that, I think, now whether procurement teams have the skill to be able to go out and do it, that's a different question entirely. But I do definitely think that it opens the door to not necessarily have to go out and get budget to invest in best of breed procurement technology to do some of the more mundane or routine process automation tasks or repository type software functionality. Likewise with project collaboration as well. So if within your team you've got someone who's quite interested in learning new software and learning new tech applications, this could be a way to be able to build some simple apps on the cheap without necessarily having to go out and sign a contract with a procurement tech vendor if you're just trying to perhaps dip your feet in the water and see how technology can help you to simplify and automate a lot of day-to-day procurement tasks. So that's number three. Number four trend that I'm seeing is the proliferation of intake solutions. And ever since Zip, as the front runner in this space, came onto the market in, I think it was early to mid 2021. I stand corrected if I've got that wrong. But ever since they came onto the market, we've started to see a gradual uptake of the number of solutions that are offering intake solutions. Intake, if you're not sure what it means, is when a stakeholder or when a supplier comes and needs to interact with procurement as a function at large. What is the first point of contact that they have with the function? And really just simplifying and facilitating that journey of the stakeholder or the supplier in terms of how they interact with you as a procurement function. There are a multitude now of solutions that do intake, and there are a lot more that claim to do it on their website, but when you scratch the surface, they actually don't really do it. The point that I'm making here is that I think user experience is going to get more and more important. Now, I know that I've talked about this a lot on previous podcasts, but I think that really ties into the fact that we're seeing a proliferation of more and more intake solutions coming onto the market. Number 5, I predicted this kind of at the beginning of the year, but we are seeing more mergers and acquisitions in this space. Just last week, Darkbeam announced that they had been acquired by Apex Analytics. Risk Methods earlier in the year were acquired by Sphera. They're both pretty big acquisitions. Apex Analytics is a third-party risk management platform. Darkbeam is a supply chain cyber security platform. So they are obviously a very good strategic fit together. But the general point is here, we're seeing more and more acquisitions in this space. And quite honestly, I think it is going to continue. And while there are, by a long way, not as many procurement tech solutions out there as there are fintech and marketing tech and legal tech solutions, for example, I do think that we're going to see a lot more consolidation in this space, both as successful companies want to build on that success and acquire complementary solutions that help them to build and add to their product portfolio faster, as well as, sadly, some solutions that perhaps aren't going to make it and will not get their next round of funding and that will get snapped up by some of the bigger players as well. Number 6 is tech companies have drastically cut back on their marketing budget across the board. I'm seeing this everywhere. Whereas tech companies, procurement tech companies last year were throwing budget and sponsoring conferences and attending conferences left, right, and center. This year, they're being much more picky about what they attend. And I think that just reflects just a sobering reality out there that, a lot of SaaS budgets have been cut. Headcount reductions, inflation is really impacting what procurement teams have got as budget to go out and spend on technology. And the general economic situation it is making sales harder for procurement tech. So I think the fact that they're cutting down on marketing budget and conferences and what they're doing as outbound activity really reflects that. Is it a sensible decision? I think I'm going to sit on the fence there. I think perhaps in the past, they've maybe been a little bit too gung-ho of what they've been spending their money on and not perhaps taking a step back and looking at what the ROI was of sponsoring certain events or attending certain conferences. Now, I think just through necessity, they're having to do that. With that being said, I do think that in some cases, if they've completely cut their marketing budget, that's perhaps a little bit too short term and a rather foolish decision because, as I've often alluded to, beyond the big players, procurement professionals often haven't heard of some of these more niche solutions. So, unless they're really getting their message out there in another way, maybe through social media with their LinkedIn presence or through SEO, through getting traffic to their website, then their brand awareness perhaps might suffer as a result of those actions, but only time will tell. Kind of connected to number 6. Number 7 is there have been a lot of layoffs in the procurement technology space, especially in sales and marketing roles. So Cooper was obviously the biggest one. They cut up to 30% of their workforce in May, but they are by far not the only ones. I've seen also that Vendor and Tealbook also cut a lot of people. And there are more out there as well that perhaps I've not heard of and that were perhaps not so big in number. But the general trend is that there have been a lot of layoffs this year, not only in procurement tech, but in SaaS and in technology companies much more widely. It's sad to see, perhaps not so surprising when you look at how quickly some of these companies scaled, perhaps a little bit too quickly, if we're all honest. But that's definitely a trend. It's started to slow down a little bit now. I've not heard over the past couple of months of any major layoffs. So maybe going into Q4 and going in towards the end of the year, that will start to stabilize. Be interesting to see if it does pick up again, if budgets come back in the new year and people are going out and buying procurement tech and the market picks up. But definitely one to be aware of if you are considering buying a solution and you want to know, okay, how well are you going to be supported from a customer success and an implementation space if a lot of these tech companies may have cut back on some of their staff. And then finally, number 8 is around the boom that I'm seeing in sustainability and supply chain transparency reporting software. Last week, it was announced that Plan A, a Berlin-based startup, got $27 million in funding. Just another one of a long chain of ESG type solutions that are really flying at the moment and growing like crazy. Part of that is obviously down to legislation, especially in the European Union. The Germans introduced their law this year, the Lieferketten-Sorgungspflichtgesetz. I lived in Germany for 12 years. That's how I can pronounce that, or the LKSG for short. That German legislation is pretty much being mirrored across Europe and is being rolled out now at a European level. And that just means that a lot of these supply chain transparency, sustainability, ESG type of software solutions are growing like crazy. And I suspect that trend will make its way across the pond to North America too, sooner rather than later. So certainly if you want to go and invest in a procurement tech company, or if you've got the opportunity to somehow get some equity or exposure to those, I think that would be a great long-term play, because I don't think any of these solutions are going to be going away anytime soon. So that is a quick 25-minute summary of where I see procurement and procurement tech in general as it stands at the beginning of October. What do you think? Have I missed anything out? Is there anything you would like to add to that? Or is there anything that you fundamentally disagree with? Drop me an email or drop me a LinkedIn DM. Would love to hear your thoughts. In the meantime, I thank you for listening to the Procuretech podcast. There are lots of procurement podcasts out there, so I'm very, very grateful that you've chosen to listen to me today. And I feel humbled that you're a listener. Don't forget to like us or write us a review on Apple Podcasts if that's where you listen to us, as it does help us to reach more people. And until next time, take care wherever you are in the world, and bye for now.